good.
So thank you all for coming here tonight in great numbers on a very cold night. Post the fair of ours, we thought you might be celebrating somewhere else. But you're most welcome, and we have what is going to be a very, very enjoyable evening. Most enjoyable. Patricia has a forest of material. She's going to share some of it with you here tonight, just some of it, because it entails another talk and maybe a third one. So Patricia has kindly agreed, will you now come back again? The answer is yes, she will. So please God, in the new year it will be continued. So to start this off, I just want to talk about Patricia Leahy Corcoran, who is our speaker here tonight. She's from the wee county Louth, with a Cavan mother and a Limerick father. She's married to Brendan. Brendan is most welcome. He's Brendan Corcoran from Templemore, well known to you all. They moved here, they bought the property, which is the old school, in 2016, and they moved in June 2020, right in the middle of the COVID. Now, she had a corporate career in the ESB, in head office. She was an event manager. She also has a degree in fine art, and she has an MA in art therapy. As I say, Brendan, her husband, has his own profession, Dublin-based, and has many strings to his academic bow as well. Their daughter Ruth, who is working in Long Island with an Irish landscaping company. Now, some of the nuns, the tangible contact with the Mercies, are here tonight, and I welcome them most sincerely. So without any more talk, I will now ask Patricia to address you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patricia. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Can I just check with you, how is the sound? Can you hear me clearly? Yes. Yeah, so I won't need to footer about with a microphone or anything like that, so that's great. So, first of all, why am I here? I'm here on the invitation of Timmy Delaney, who invited me to come and present something of the history of the old convent. You can see the building here, it's very beautiful. And prior to that, why am I here? I'm here because on the 14th of February in 2016, my husband Brendan Corcoran came up to me with a laptop and he said to me, "What do you think of that?" And on that, he's a great moocher on the old daft. So on that was this beautiful building that he found. And he said, "Do you like it?" I liked it instantly, of course, who wouldn't? And we decided to go and view it. And that was February 2016, and in September we had it purchased. When I met Brendan, I instantly fell in love with him, love at first sight. And when we both saw the house, it was exactly the same thing. We weren't looking to move home, we weren't searching for a property, but it just grabbed our hearts. And we thought it was an exceptionally beautiful building with an exceptional history to it. And it actually broke our hearts to see it sitting vacant for practically 20 years. So we just thought something needs to be done about this. And we were called forth. I kind of say that it was Cupid's arrow, did its business on the 14th of February 2016. So that's the second reason why I'm here. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share all of the knowledge that we have accumulated over the last 9 or 10 years with you. It's my pleasure to do that. So without further ado, I'll move along. So the information is being presented to the best of my researched ability. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily all accurate. I'm not a local historian. I'm not a historian at all. But I am really happy to share all of the nuggets with you all in the community. My approach to the whole project has been to represent place and people chronologically in order of time. And in doing that, I really wanted to honour the land. I wanted to honour the site, because there's great history associated with the ring fort on Fair Green, and it was really important for me to integrate that into the story. I could have fast forwarded into, like, through, you could say, from the 30s, 40s into the 90s, but I really wanted to honour the history of the land, so I've started further back. Thus, there probably will be another talk to bring the story, if you like, of the Sisters of Mercy up to date, up to the 1990s, when they left the property. Okay, so my topics are, number one, the Fair Green and the Rath. I'm going to look at fact and folklore. Number two, I'm not sure if you're aware of the Burke Endowment of 1875, which made it possible for the sisters to actually build on the site. I look at that. The third topic is the request to the Mercy Order and Diocese for the sisters to actually occupy a convent in Borrisoleigh. The fourth that I'm going to address is the fundraising and the build of the convent. And then the fifth item I'll be looking at is the actual move-in, which happened in 1928. So you can see that's the last topic on my list. I will talk up to about 1930, and then we have to wait until the new year for it to carry on. I have a beautiful annals, if you like, that has been given to me here by Sister Koch, who's with us this evening, and that is a lot of the anecdotal stories of their occupancy of the convent. So to do it justice, I think it needs to be incorporated into a separate talk. So I'll bring the programme as far forward as I can this evening while honouring the time that we have. Okay? So thanks to the Historical Society for inviting me to be here and to speak about the former Mercy Convent. I've gone through that, the invitation. And now this shows us a map of Borrisoleigh. This is an Ordnance Survey map of Borrisoleigh, and on it, it highlights the various historical sites around the town or village. And notably, we have here the ring forts, number of ring forts, and then the castle and memorial stone. So that just puts the place, sets the place in context. Moving on, I'm going to look at the Rath, the folklore aspect of the Rath. So in relation to this, Jane Francesca Agnes Wilde was the mother of Oscar Wilde, and she wrote under the pen name of Speranza. She was born in Wexford 1821 to 1896. She was a poet and she was a nationalist supporter. She wrote a really good book, I have it here, called Ancient Legends of Ireland by Lady Wilde, Oscar's mother. Okay? And out of that I'm going to refer to information that she has provided on the fairy Rath. Can you hear me okay? Yes. All clear. Good. I don't need a microphone. So, the ancient Rath or fort or liss generally enclosed about a half acre and had 2 or more ramparts formed by the heads of tribes for defence. But when the race of the chieftains died out, then the Sidhe crowded into the forts, and there held their councils, their revels and their dances. So we're talking about the fairies now. And if a man put his ear close to the ground at night, he could hear the sweet fairy music rising up from under the earth. The Rath ever after is sacred to the fairies, and no mortal is allowed to cut down a tree that grows on it or to carry away a stone. But dangerous above all would it be to build on a fairy Rath. If a man attempted such a rash act, the fairies would put a blast on his eyes or give him a crooked mouth, for no human hand should dare to touch their ancient dancing grounds. So I'm referring to this, of course, because there is a Rath in the grounds on which the convent has been built. So that's the ancient aspect of it, which is very interesting. And then moving into the more factual aspect of it, Brendan and I commissioned an archaeological assessment. It needed to be done to check and see the lie of the land, literally, to see if there were any ancient artefacts or anything on it. The fear was that any renovation might disturb the ancient rats, so a study needed to be done. So a report was commissioned by ourselves in 2019, I have that here, to assess the impact of development on the house, given that there's a conservation order on it at this point in time. And the site has historical associations from antiquity. So the content of that report, the key aspects of it, and there's probably a 30-page document, but it highlighted the fact that Borrisoleigh was an early medieval period settlement. The early medieval period is depicted in the surviving sources as largely rural, characterised by the basic territorial unit known as a tuha. Byrne of 1973 estimates that there were probably at least 150 kings in Ireland at any given time during this period, each ruling over his own tuha. Each tuha would have consisted of between 1,700 and 3,000 subjects, according to the most recent estimates. One of the most common indicators of a settlement during this period is the ring fort. Ring forts were often constructed to protect rural farmsteads and are usually defined as a broadly circular enclosure. They typically enclosed by an earthen bank and exterior ditch and range from 25 metres to 50 metres. And I think ours ranges from, I think it's probably in the region of about 40 metres in diameter. So ring forts are most commonly located at sites with commanding views of the surrounding environs. And we know that that is the case with the site. Up the way. Sorry. So that's Rath fact. So Borrisoleigh, the archaeological assessment also stated that Borrisoleigh is recorded as a historic town. It has a high number of ring forts, as we saw on the map previously, suggesting a thriving medieval population. All raths are afforded legal protection under the National Monuments Act of 1994, and they are held in trust by the owners of the land for the culture of the community and of the country, in actual fact. So they have legal protection, which is a wonderful thing. The rath was located centrally in the Fair Green. Do I have that there? Next slide. I should go over to that in a moment. So it was located centrally in the Fair Green, which spans Pallas Street, and they noted that there was a well-preserved ditch on the one up on the site, and the study failed to identify any features of archaeological significance, which was actually a relief to us because it meant that we could proceed. So this was the Fair Green area here, which was new information for me. There's quite a span of it there. You can see here, Pallas Street. Is that clear to you? And then this indicates the actual ring fort here. So there's a huge plot of land over here that was the Fair Green, together with this part back here behind the ring fort. And then this area here in red is the actual site that was proposed for development. So in actual fact, there's no development happening here at all. The house is tiny in this little corner here. It's only about that size, which is actually wonderful to note that the ring fort is probably 2/3, if not more, the size of the house itself. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to honour its presence. You know, it's ancient, it's been there before any of us, it'll be there after we all go. It's the presiding land. And it's thriving with history and magic. Yeah. And I really just wanted to honour that in starting out the story this evening. So the study failed to identify any features of archaeological significance other than the well-preserved ditch. So the elevated site, it was a 6-acre site, and it was known locally as the Mount. It was the location of Tipperary tenant farmer club meetings in July of 1879, and that developed on into the formation of the Land League in 1880, when Michael Davitt and Daniel O'Connell are said to have addressed the community here. 20,000 people apparently, and that was from a newspaper article, so there is some truth in it. So the second report that Brenton and I commissioned was an assessment of historical and architectural interest on the house itself, more primarily on the house than on the site, and that was by an architectural historian called Dr. Frederick O'Dwyer. So you can see there's great depth to the document. I took a lot of the facts of the story out of this, and it's available to the community if anybody wants to have a read of it, further detail. There's details in it around the Mercy Order community, a lot of details around the diocese, all of the archbishops, all of the various canons and priests of the parish, and a lot of history around the architects and the history of the architects associated with it. I've just given it one slide, but there's a lot more detail there. So from that document, there's a reference to a commentary on the Fair Green, quoting from a Father Kenny S.J. book that wrote the history of Glenkeen of Borrisoleigh. It was written in 1944. So a reference on the Fair Green and the Rath. I'll quote: "Hence, when a platform was set up on the Borrisoleigh fort for the Monster Land League meeting of 1880, boys began to discuss whether the fairies would feel offended. 'No, they won't,' said one who had heard of their origin. 'Sure, they were Irish before any of us.' Nor did they. Over 20,000 men crowded on and around the fort, and doubtless its fairies' residents rejoiced when the orator's demand that Ireland's men should own her soil and rule it was made good. Nor would the Sidhe resent the upper levelling of their home to provide schools and a home for the sisters. Rather would they rejoice to see them teach the tongue which the Tuatha Danann taught to the Milesians, and to hear their children daily recite in resonant Gaelic the Rosary of Mary." So the understanding was that the fairies wouldn't be too perturbed by the Land League meetings that were going up. I also have a quote then from the National Archives from 1826 on faction fights, which also took place on the site. So actually this comes out of a Freeman's Journal, and it refers to particular fights that must have happened at the time. They might make more sense to you than to me. Both fights were between the magpies and the black hens. The first in 1826 lasting 2 days, despite the best efforts of the parish priest to break it up. The second happened a year later, in which one participant was seriously injured, was reported in the Freeman's Journal, 15th of June 1827, where the magpies and the black hens, they were North Tipperary groupings, and the local factions in Borrisoleigh were called the Pallas, do you know of the Pallas, and the Bawnies. They were the two local faction groups, and they were presumably divided by loyalty to the larger factions. Have you heard of them before?
Yes.
Yeah, the Pallas and the Bawnies. I hadn't heard of them before. So, here we have an image of Borrisoleigh Fife and Drum Band circa 1905, and they played at the various Land League meetings on the site in the Ring Fort. And they also played at evictions around the county locally to support the families that were being evicted. They were very troubled times, very troubled times. But it's a fabulous picture, and there's a resonance for Michael, with somebody in the bottom left-hand corner. We might hear about that later, Michael. So, that's part one. It's essentially a little summary of the ring fort and the site. I'm going to move on now to part two, and I'd be delighted to know if you know of this person. It was completely new to me. So I'm going to introduce you to Mrs. Mary Ann Burke-Nee-Gray. Have you heard of a Mary Ann Burke-Nee-Gray? No. Okay. Well, none of us associated with the convent building would be here if it wasn't for Mary Ann Burke-Nee-Gray. Mary Ann Burke was married to Milo Burke, who was a cousin. The Burke clan were descendants of the Norman warlord Walter de Burgo. Borrisoleigh originated from the burgage plots around Walter's castle. Her uncle Martin Burke founded the Shelburne Hotel in Dublin in 1824. Mary and Milo had one daughter called Mary Ann, named Mother Mary de Mercy, and she entered Loughrea Convent in 1869. Mrs. Burke lived in a rented house from the Green family in 14 Main Street. We would know it as the previous vet's office. So that was the house that Mary Ann Burke lived in. She had two uncles who were assassinated by disaffected tenants in 1831, and her brother George was a member of the Tenants' Rights League. A very important person in this story. Mrs. Burke died on the 4th of September in 1875, God rest her soul. She owned a 19-acre property in Capernilly townland, and that is now where Riverview and Centra are located on the Nina Road. I need to move this along. I'm talking faster than I'm clicking. The property came to her via her mother, Margaret Lee Gray, and she was the wife of Richard Burke of Currabaha. 1 week before Mary Ann's death, she established a monetary trust to fund the building of a mercy convent in Borrisoleigh. Her vision was to bring a measure of harmony and reconciliation to the town while educating future generations of local children. And this was particularly post-social unrest and her own tragic losses in her family with the death of her uncles. There was a lot of social unrest at the time. So there we have Mary Ann Burke, and she has endowed money to the village, to the order, for the building of the convent. Wouldn't have happened without her, more than likely. So the task fell to the Sisters of Templemore Convent versus the Loughrea Convent, where her daughter was. There's a huge history in the report around the dynamics between the archdiocese, the various bishops. So essentially, I won't go into the history of that, but the Templemore Convent, where the request went to them. So before Mrs. Burke's death, the deeds of the Capernilly site were transferred to the parish priest of the time, Canon Patrick Morris, as trustee for the diocese of Cashel and Emly, and 3 senior members of the Templemore Mercy Sisters, Mary Ann Crean, Joanna Walsh, Mary Ann MacDonald, and they were the beneficial owners now of these 19 acres out in Capernilly. So the site was sold 10 years later in 1885. And we know very little about that, but we know that it was 10 years later. So moving on. Canon Morris's request. On the 8th of December 1876, so this is the following year after Mary Ann Burke passed away, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, application was made for a convent in Borrisoleigh to be a branch house of the Templemore Sisters by Parish Priest Very Reverend Canon Patrick Morris to Archbishop Most Reverend Dr. Crope, who supported his request. So Dr. Crope was patron of the Gaelic Catholic Association, together with Michael Davitt and Charles Stewart Parnell, and the GEA marked the end, as far as we're aware, of the faction fights in Tipperary and Munster. So, first convent in Main Street. So 2 years later, after the application went in 1878, the new convent was not built on Capernilly site. However, Mrs. Burke's rented residence on Main Street was used as the convent. It was willed to her daughter, Mother Mary de Mercy of the Loughrea convents. 4 choir and 1 lay sisters commenced on the 17th of January 1878, and their vocation was in education and supporting older town inhabitants. Stables at the rear were converted into schoolrooms, and it overlooked Chapel Lane where the previous parish church stood, and there's no record traced as to why the convent was not built on the Capernilly site. I don't know if anybody knows anything about that in the audience, but anyway, it might come out of the woodwork in due course. So, there's no account given for the 50-year gap between the arrival of the Mercy Sisters to Borrisoleigh in 1878 and the build of the convent on Fair Green in 1928. Capernilly site, which was trusted to the diocese and the Mercy Order for that purpose, was sold in 1885. No account of the finances related to that. Now here we have the ordnance survey map of the 1840s. So the top red X marks the site of the Capernilly site, and you can see the scale of it there, the size of it. You can see the green bar indicates the site where the sisters actually moved in, that Main Street house that was rented, and it goes back quite a distance. And then down here we have the site that actually ended up being used for the convent, and also you can see the span of the Fair Green, which is twice the size of the original Capernilly site. That's quite interesting. So we move on to, 50 years from the time that the sisters came in to the build of the convent house on Pallas Street. So we're looking now at other parish building projects. Capernilly site was sold in 1885. Canon Patrick Morris passed away in 1889. He left £1,000 to build a new parish church. His successor was Father Edmund Kenrick. He started to build the parish church, which was opened between 1892 and 1895. Father Kenrick's successor was Canon Patrick Ryan, who was appointed parish priest in 1907. His priority was to finish the church and to erect a parochial house on Fair Green in 1910 to 1911. So the priority was to build the church and to build the parochial house. Parish debts were cleared in 1922, and at that point in time then Canon Ryan was free to progress the new convent build, which was a legal obligation under the terms of Mrs. Burke's trust fund in 1875. So the Fair Green, or Our Lady's Mount, the Fair Green was the site chosen by Canon Patrick Ryan, who was a native of Galbally, County Limerick, which is actually quite close to where my father came from, Kilmallock. It was paid for by Mother Mary Ignatius Hayden of the Mercy Order, and she was the bursar of the community in Templemore. So the site was paid for by the Templemore sisters. It was purchased from the Lynch family, apparently. The parochial house was built on the Fair Green 1910 to 1911. A statue of the Blessed Virgin was placed in the Rath in November 1927. So the parochial house was built in 1910, and it took until 1927 to start anything happening in the Fair Green site for the sisters. And the statue was funded by the Children of Mary Sodality. At that point in time, the mount was renamed Our Lady's Mount. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And Canon Ryan at that point also arranged for fares to be transferred from the Fair Green into the town. And And here we have an image of the fair of Borrisoleigh. So you can only imagine what the chaos was like, having had a beautiful green field site, an enormous span of perfect pasture land to have your fairs and your markets and so on and so forth, and then to be moved from that into Pallas Street, essentially. I don't know if you have any stories related to it or if you know anything about it, but I imagine it was quite chaotic. And I don't actually know how they managed to do it, but they did. So, and I do know that in this lovely book here that Sister Koch gave me, there are some stories about the sisters in their long black gowns and their perfectly polished shoes, walking through the muck and the mire of the streets, coming and going up and down. In actual fact, that is Pallas Street. You can see at the bottom, that's where the church is. So I'd say it was fun, to say the least. So would any of you like to share any stories at this point in time, or have you got any questions so far, or anything that you can add in relation to the Fair of Borris?
They say that a lot of the faction fights used to take place at the Fair of Borrisoleigh.
Yes, yes, so I believe.
No wonder. People would be in good humour, I suppose, or
I'd
not
imagine.
more, as they say.
A few bobs were in the back pocket at that point. Yeah, yeah. But it was chaotic also.
Yeah, as well as the cattle there in Pallas Street, you also had hordes of cattle and people from sort of the hurling field up as far as Shanahan's.
Oh, right, on the main street.
And in Chapel Street as well.
Yeah.
So the whole village was covered with cattle.
And it was only on one day of the year, is that it?
Yes.
November the 27th.
27th,
Ah,
that's
that's
right. And it was a day off school, apparently,
right.
school closed. Yeah, a delight for everybody.
If you go to the genealogy records, it's amazing the amount of marriages that took place at the 27th of November. Quite an amount.
Legal ones.
Yes, if you go to the Borrisoleigh genealogy. And
Okay.
it was the boys who got the day off school, much to the displeasure of the girls.
Yes, interesting. Yeah. So there was a combination of mirth and madness going on. Anything else?
Yeah, you're referring to a period there after the parish priest's house was built
Yes.
until the convent was built.
Yes.
I think in that time that the primary school was built over here
Okay.
in preparation for the move on.
Okay.
And
What was the name of that school?
St. Teresa's.
St. Teresa's. Okay.
the stones for that school, to build that school, were brought up from Templemore, from Carol's Abbey, which was
Ah.
a place that was based derelict.
Okay. Okay.
And that it was done with voluntary labour. All the people with horses and cars brought up those stones.
From Templemore.
From
My goodness. And is that then the building that is parallel to Pallas Street, the one that's now painted yellow? That building?
Yes.
So it has all that lovely stone on it.
It's the oldest building there.
St. Teresa's.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of my questions actually. Thank you for that.
That's why, that's why they mentioned that the nuns were walking through the mire, as you call it.
Yeah,
They were still living down the street.
they were. Yes. Okay, so that's the oldest building then of the whole development.
Yeah, that's the first building.
And have you any sense of the year that would have been? If the parochial house was 1910.
1927.
1927? So that's the same year then as the convent was built?
Before it was opened before the convent was built.
Okay, so it might have been 26-ish even.
Maybe.
Yeah. That's good to know. Yeah. Thank you. Anything else? No, roll along. Now, so I'm going to move on now. I'm still in part 4 and I'm going to look at the convent build project. So plans were presented in December 1926. The project was tendered in local papers in January 1927. Direct labour was used and direct supply of materials. and that information came from the Mercy Order archives in Baggot Street. A fundraising committee to support the build of the convent was formed in Templemore in 1927. And there you can just see a rough sketch of the original building and the proposed layout in plan form. So there's a question mark as to whether the architect's drawings were from architect Ashland or O'Malley. So the build was supervised by a Limerick engineer and architect Joseph O'Malley. He was the father of Donogh O'Malley, the former Minister for Education. And the designs were very similar to Dublin and Thurles-based architect George Coppinger Ashland, who we have a picture of here. He was, in actual fact, at that time, the architect to Archbishop Dr. Croke. And Ashland was also involved in the completion of the Thurles Cathedral, and he was commissioned for the Templemore Church in 1876. So without going into too much detail, our instinct, our understanding is that it was Ashland who actually designed the plans for the Capernilly site at an earlier date, and they were resurrected for the build in the 1920s because they weren't, while O'Malley oversaw the build, he didn't sign them as his drawings.
Yes.
And neither were because it was built in 1927-28, the design doesn't reflect the engineering or the architecture of that time, because they were older, more Victorian style drawings, you know, going back to the late 1800s. So our understanding is that that was actually Ashland who designed the house. So this is an old photograph we resurrected for the build at the time, 1927, 1928, with the foreman's shed here in the foreground. It also shows the original cast concrete stone that the building was made out of. And there are three people here. Don't have a pointer with me. There's somebody here at the end of the ladder, there's somebody here on the top of the scaffolding, and there's somebody up here wearing an apron or a skirt, as they say. So it's a lovely picture to have. So the building contractors, John Lamb of Thurles was the main contractor, and £1,000 was paid to him in 1927. John Ryan was the site foreman. There's a debate around the specification of brick versus cavity wall that was used, because apparently the plans specified red brick, but they used concrete cavity wall was used. So a Mother Mary Magdalene ordered 500 carts of sand at 1 6p per load in April 1927. And this apparently was to help provide local employment. And Lamb died in May 1929, and external rendering was completed and final payment made to Mrs. Lamb in July 1929. And the boundary wall was completed in 1930. Yeah, that must have taken a lot of sand as well. It's a very large wall, isn't it? Enormous. So then, just kicking forward, Maguire and Gatchell of Dublin installed a central heating system in 1934, which, if my sums are right, indicates that for about 4 or 5 years the sisters were living in the house without any heat, other than 2 open fires. And maybe, I don't know if the AGA was installed at that point in time, but when Brendan and I came to town first, we camped, as we said, under the roof of the old house for the first year, and we had no heat. We did have electricity, we had no cooker, we had no showers, and so we know what it was like to live in the house just with 2 open fires, and it was freezing. We used to fight with each other as to who was going to do the washing up, because you'd have a boiled kettle of hot water to dip your hands into. You know, it was really quite exceptional. So if you can imagine those ladies devout and honourable as they were, living there and enduring that for 5 years before the heating kicked in. Challenging, to say the least. So we move on now to the convent bill project of 1928.
Sorry, Patricia, it's probably just noting
Yeah.
the concrete blocks that are used to build the house. The
Yeah.
reason the concrete blocks, the cavity blocks, were one of the priests had gone over to the States and saw a machine to build the cavity blocks, and he brought back that idea, and that's why they ended up building it in cavity blocks. And because they're porous, that was the reason they were never meant to be left as just open. You used to throw it in water, so we actually had to do the pebble dash there and rough cast on to cover it off and stop throwing in the water afterwards, because while it was good for the States, it wasn't great for us to construction. So that's just maybe the reason why they didn't go with red brick and went with cavity block, was when the priests had the idea.
Yeah, so subsequently after the build, they realised that there was an intense damp issue. When they lit the fires actually drew dampness from the outside into the house, and so they then had to put the pebble dash on the outside to help prevent that. Thanks, Brendan. So, the project was managed by Canon Ryan and Mother Magdalene Marr, who was in Alice Marr of Tipperary. Now, I don't know if that was Alice Marr of Tipperary town.
No, sorry, New Inn.
New Inn.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Coach. That's lovely, I'm happy to know that. It was paid for by Mother Mary Ignatius Hayden, who was the bursar of the Mercy community in Templemore. It was incomplete at the time of move-in in October 1928. And the Main Street building, which is now the vet's office, was sold to the parish for £700 in 1929, and that then became the curate's residence. The convent chapel was built in 1929, and I have it as St. Teresa's National School on the adjacent site was opened in 1930. But you might correct me on that, Coach.
It probably started to build probably 1927, 28.
Okay, yeah, because these went up first. Yeah. Thank you. So we have then another image without the four man's shed, so it's coming along, as they say. We reckon this is 1927, well, it would have been more 27 than 28 because this is moved in 1928. So we move on now to the Templemore Convent Bazaar and Fete. This was a fundraising bazaar held on the 24th of June to the 1st of July 1929. The bazaar raised £1,523, and there were 32 executive committee members, 11 lady stallholder members. There were 9 on the publicity committee, 12 on the amusements committee, 11 on the concert and dramatic committee, and 8 on the transport committee. So it was a hell of a bazaar, and obviously the logistics of organising all of that was quite something. And I was kindly given a copy of the original Templemore Convent Bazaar and Fete programme, which I have here. Anybody can look through if they wish. So on the front page we have Cleary's of Dublin advertising. It's filled with a lot of advertisements, so they got a lot of support, which was lovely. But it's a lovely piece given to me by Fitzy down in the petrol station on the main street. So pictured here we have His Grace, the Archbishop of Cashel, Most Reverend Dr. Harty, who was pressing for the build at the point in time, had his support. And here we have the Executive Committee of 1927. Do you want me to read out the names?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So we have back row N. Nally, J. Kennedy, T. Kevin, R. Marr, and T. Shelley. Front row we have J. Walsh, Dr. J. Mitchell, J. Short, and T.F. Marr.
T.F. Marr.
Yes.
Do you recognise any of them?
Yes,
Anybody?
very well known names.
Okay. Okay, so that was the executive committee, and I think there were a lot more as well, but they feature in the photograph. And then moving on,
The ladies' committee.
we have the ladies' stallholders. Yeah. And the back row, Mrs. Fanning, Mrs. O'Brien, Miss Cormack, Miss Collier, front row, Mrs. Casey, Mrs. Kevin, and Mrs. Canby. So they were
Look
the
at the
ladies.
hats.
Sorry?
Look at the hats.
Absolutely, yeah. They made it all happen, which is wonderful. And then just a little excerpt from the back page of the catalogue I'll read to you. This is very beautiful. The Sisters of Mercy Templemore and Borrisoleigh beg to express their deep appreciation and gratitude to all the bazaar workers, especially to the parish priests and curates of both parishes who have generously aided them. The committee and stall workers have given faithful and untiring service. Each in his or her measure has done the best, for which the sisters are deeply grateful. When our work is done and the bazaar workers dispersed, all will in years to come look back with joy on their labours, and whatever mistakes have been made, rest content in the thought that they have contributed much in the building of a new convent for the honour and glory of God and His Blessed Mother, June 1928. I thought that was a lovely close, really, really nice. That's the actual back page of the programme there. That'll please. Now, I'm coming to the end of part 4. So the first Mother Superior to our understanding was Mother Mary Magdalene Nee Alice Marr. She was appointed the first Mother Superior of the Borrisoleigh Convent in 1928. She also had lived in the first convent on Main Street. She taught in St. Joseph's School. She played the organ in the parish church, and she managed the fundraising of the build in Borrisoleigh, while the sisters managed the fundraising in Templemore. And we have an old photograph there, and we know that it's John Ryan, and we can only presume that it's Mother Mary Magdalene with her back turned to the camera. And hopefully it is. So if you don't mind my asking, where was St. Joseph's School? Which school or building was that, do you know?
I'd say that was that the school in Chapel Street? The one
Oh yes, so that's what that would have been called, the Chapel Street one.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
yeah. The lane.
Yes,
The back of where the lane is.
at the back of Main Street Convent House. Okay, perfect, yeah. Okay. And then here we have Borrisoleigh school children in the 1920s. I leave that up for the cup of tea, and you can have a look at various names and so on. You might recognise some people.
Yes.
It's lovely. And there's a lot of, they have a lot of medals, so maybe they were some of the sodality
The
group.
children Mary.
Not quite sure.
Are the children Mary met from that session.
Do you want some names?
Yeah.
Are you okay? Yeah. Time is marching on. So
The children Mary met.
the next image
Yeah.
is the late 30s. Another lovely grouping there. I put both of those up like that during the cup of tea. There's interest in them.
Very interesting.
Isn't it lovely? So we have some notes from the annals in the records in Bagot Street of Mother Mary's Marr's notebook. So Canon Ryan, the PP, donated £100 to the build. Archbishop Harty donated £100 to the build. Templemore Bazaar raised 1523.
Total funds in October raised 1930 was £2,685. Now the convent and church in total cost £7,300. In May, windows cost 320, and in June, statues cost 11. So we're imagining that the statues that cost 11 must have been for the interior, because the ones on the exterior facades were already up at that point in time, or we think, we don't quite know actual fact. So we have no record of the monies that were required at the sale of the Capernilly site 10 years previous to this. We don't know what happened to those funds, but I'd say it would have, they probably would have made a lot more than 7,300, I'd imagine, on the sale of the site. Who knows? So I'm moving on now to the church build project at the back of the convent house. So the Irish Times advertised tenders for the church on the 25th of July 1929. So the sisters had moved in at this point in time, but the chapel wasn't built. The contractor was a William Duggan, and a payment was made to him in October 1929. The foundation stone was laid by Archbishop Harty in 1929, September, and the church was in usable form in 1930. It was built initially with Georgian-style windows, which were taken out subsequently and replaced with stained glass windows as donors came forward, who would have paid for the windows. And they're all honoured underneath with little plaques built into the actual stained glass window. They're all honoured. So the names of all the donors are under the six windows. Very beautiful. Canon Ryan passed away in February 1930, and he didn't see the church completed, which is unfortunate. And Duggan received payments up to 1932 for window installations. So we're imagining that that contractor was the person who stayed on to take out the Georgian windows and help put in the stained glass windows. Exactly. So the next picture gives you a little vision of the inside of the chapel. And the end piece, three-light crucifixion window, is exquisite. And I'd say it is probably 90% the reason why I'm here now. It was my my desire, in a sense, to honour it and rescue it and bring love to it and save it essentially from ruin. I was driving up to NCAD. I was studying for my degree at the time, and I was travelling in the car. And it was decision time between Brendan and I. We needed to make the ultimate decision. Are we going to go for it or are we not? We knew it was going to be a huge undertaking because it was a conservation order on it. So I was driving along the car in traffic in Dublin, and I was thinking about this image. And it was calling to me. And next thing, I always listen to Lyric FM on the radio. And what came charming through Lyric FM, only the tunes of P.A. Jesu, as this image was in my mind's eye. So I said, that's it. The decision is made. So you can understand there's a real genuine calling to love the place back to life. So I'm moving on now to the installation of the stained glass windows. Early and Company of 1861 to 1975 were ecclesiastical furnishings and stained glass manufacturers. They were based in Camden Street, Dublin. The company was founded by John and Thomas Early. They were born in Birmingham of Irish parents, and we think they came from Leitrim. Thomas was responsible for stained glass installation at the Great Exhibition in Hyde Park in October 1851, and they have works in the Church of the Sacred Heart in Temple Moor. They installed all of the windows in the chapel. We're absolutely blessed to have exquisite works of art there. Their albums are now preserved in the National College of Art and Design archives in Dublin.
and they were contemporaries of Harry Clark, who's a world-famous stained glass artist, Irish-born. And Dr. Michael Early, who is the grandson of these gentlemen, spoke at the Tipperary People and Lecture Series in the Source Library in February of this year. So that would have been a really wonderful lecture to attend.
A few of us were at that.
Ah,
And it's online.
it's available on YouTube. I listened to it actually, yeah. So that brings us up to the 1930s and the installation of the windows in the chapel. So it's now 9:05 and it's time to wrap up. I have looked at 5 key topics: the fair green, the wrath, the folklore aspect and the fact aspect. I've looked at the Burke Endowment of 1875, which actually, in my opinion, financed, or at least initiated the finance of the build of the convent in the town. I've looked at the request to the Mercy Order and Diocese for the Sisters of Temple Ward to set up a mother house. What did mother house say? Daughter house, branch, that's the word. And I've looked at the fundraising of the convent and the convent bill. Sorry. I don't have that one there. And I've looked at the move-in 1928. So you can understand why I didn't want to pack it in with any more information in relation to the occupancy, if you like, and the time of the sisters in Borrisoleigh from the 30s through to the 90s in actual fact, because I wouldn't have done the story justice, and therefore I suppose we're of the opinion that that might be the subject of another presentation in due course in the new year, and I'd be happy to do that. So I just have a slide there on our sources. So I mentioned the architecture and historian Frederick O'Dwyer, and he conducted the assessment of historical and architectural interest. That's a wonderful book for anybody who wants further detail on the history of the build. I mentioned the archaeological consultancy report and Mother Mary Magdalene's notebook, the Mercy Order archives, the annals of the convent of Borrisoleigh Templemore, the history of Leahy, Borrisoleigh, and Templemore Convent Bazaar and Fate programme. And I also took some photographs on the borrisoleigh.ie website, which was a great source of some of the older ones. So, finally, I would just like to honour the land, the ancestors, the Dinna She, or the fairy folk, Mary Ann Burke, who in my estimation made it all possible, the Mercy Order community of Templemore and Borrisoleigh, the Archbishop's parish priests, all of the diligent hearts and hands of the community who I referenced in this report, and I suppose in particular the wonderful help of the community in Templemore in the setting up of that bazaar and that fair. You can see all of the bodies, the number of committees. It was just tremendous support, and it indicates the harmony and the communication between the two parishes. Certainly at the time, there was obviously very good relations between the two. So any other comments from the floor? Any other stories to share? Any memories triggered? Or are we all dying for a cup of tea?
We're dying for more.
A cup of tea. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for listening. And I hope sorry, Michael, can I just say that we are interested in documenting any stories that anybody might have. So Michael has my email address, and anybody can note them down and pop them up to us, or stop us on the street in passing at any stage. I'm sure there's lots of personal experiences that would enrich the history going forward. because we're making history now. And it would be just great to record it. Yeah. Thank you.
I was just going to, and you've done it, ask for a rapturous round of applause for Patricia. We've had many significant, magnificent presentations here in the past, over the last 12 years, but I think this ranks as one of the best. It was spellbinding. A lot of people who are not here tonight don't realise what they've missed. It's unbelievable the amount of stuff that we've had the pleasure of seeing and listening to over the last hour. So I just want to thank Patricia and Brendan for bringing this project to fruition. I want to thank them for restoring the old convent and all that goes with it. Congratulate them on their bravery and wish them every success in the future in their ventures. And as I say, she is coming back again in the new year. That's certainly something to look forward to. Thank you one and all. The tea is brewing. You're welcome to have a participation in all of that. Thanks again.